Well, welcome back to the Dublin Radio Gamescast. As always, we're here to talk about video games and have a maybe bad time, I guess.
Oh
Uh,
no.
I love how it's becoming more and more of a guarantee that we're going to have a bad time on the show.
I force you to talk about things that nobody likes. That's not true. We're going to talk about things that we do like this time. All
This
right.
time.
Well, as always, I'm your host, Ryan. I'm joined today by my lovely duo of co-hosts, Alex and Wyatt.
Hi.
Hello.
I have no monitor and I must scream.
Great. Perfect.
Awesome. Awesome.
That was maybe the most cohesive introduction we've had from you for a while, Alex. I'm glad that your
It's
methodology
usually
has
it's it's
changed.
it's it's usually these like the script to like a little one act play over there as the intro. It's great.
It's amazing. Yeah, I live for it. All right. Well, we don't need to talk about one act play things because we've been playing video games and we want to talk about them. But
For more than an
first,
act?
we got some video game industry stuff to chat about. We generally stopped talking about the stuff on the podcast itself proper just because a lot of it there's other sources that hit this stuff faster than we can. So a lot of it we just kind of skip by unless it's really important. But there's been a few things that are really interesting. Namely, Black Myth Wukong is a big piece right now. It's coming out very soon. It's actually out on Tuesday. If you're listening to this after the fact, it's out as you're listening to it. But there's been a few things going on with this game. It's gotten stellar reviews, accepting some technical issues supposedly, and a lack of PS5 keys being sent out has been noted
Huh.
by a bunch of people. So there's some thought that maybe the PS5 port is probably not as cooked as it should be.
Uh-oh.
But we don't know until it releases. The other thing, and this is, we don't have a finale on this part of the story yet, so we don't actually know how true this is or is not. There is a rumor floating around, and this has been corroborated by Paul Tassi and a few other like very well-known uh, journalists, critics, whatever you want to say. But there's also been a few critics that have said they haven't seen proof of this, though I think they've since sort of walked that back a little bit. All right. So
Oh, what?
the gist of this is that they were given a do's and don'ts list that this went out to streamers, not to reviewers. Don't insult the influencer or other players. Makes perfect sense. Don't use offensive language. All right. Odd to I think request that from a streamer in writing, but not that weird. But then it's like do not include politics and then a bunch of other stuff inside this. And this is where we're getting weird with it. And then it says don't use trigger words such as quarantine or isolation or COVID-19.
What is this? What is this an agreement for?
This was like the streamer agreement, right? Like a weird thing that was sent around with some guidelines for like streaming the game or something. Um, and then don't discuss content related to China's game industry policies. Just all that fun stuff. Interesting.
That's
But again,
very
we have
interesting.
no idea like what the full extent of this is. It's just a weird thing. It's just a thing that popped up. It has no bearing on the game itself, but it's just it is a weird little bit of games industry thing. All
Huh.
right, I'll let you
Interesting.
sit and mull on that.
Oh, I'm stewing in that, all right.
I think
Just
this is
doing
a
it a little bit.
situation where, at least for me, I want more information before
Yeah, that's
I
where
really
I'm
like
at, right?
judge
Because
it.
we
You
really
know,
all we have really is Paul Tassi's reporting on this to go off of. There's very little else here about
which not to
this.
say he isn't a reputable source. However, I think
It's one
more
person, right? And
concrete. Yeah, yeah.
I trust that and he's also saying that this isn't direct information. It's from someone else that he knows. So again, like totally, he is not trying to claim that this is 100% the case, but he has certainly been like the front line for that information. All right. After that, we've got a few other bits of things coming out. Aside from us also, I think, just being pretty excited about Black Myth Wukong as a game. Reviews have been
Yeah.
pretty positive, and I think action gamer that I am very excited to jump into it
It's
come
pretty
Tuesday.
it's pretty it's pretty interesting to see just like a straight laced like adaptation of the story versus like something that's heavily inspired by it or something like that. It is No, it's Journey to the West. Like, bam, that's what it is,
Yes.
which is pretty interesting.
Yeah, it wears its inspiration on its sleeve a lot more than like Enshrouded, or not Enshrouded. What is it? The old Naughty Dog game, right?
No,
Naughty
it's an
Dog
old.
game.
It was
No. It was the
Why am I
the Hellblade developer.
Ninja Theory. Yeah,
Ninja
yeah,
Theory.
Ninja
Thank
Theory.
you. Yeah.
Man, how am I forgetting the name of that
Odyssey
game?
to the West.
Yes.
Huh. I thought you were gonna liken like Jack and Daxter to some old.
No, Enslaved
mythological
Odyssey
tale.
to the West is based on Journey to the West. The game,
Huh.
like it is a wild factoid because like when that game came out, Journey to the West was not nearly as well known in the Western world as it is now. So
It
not
also
a lot of
takes
people knew.
it has a sci-fi take on that story, which is pretty fascinating in and of
Are you
itself.
playing as the priest or Sun Wukong, or like their equivalents? I'm assuming.
I think you're asking two people that haven't read Journey to the West that
Oh.
question, Alex, and we can't answer. I just know it is based on that. A great game too. Enslaved is really good. Yeah. All right. Well, Black Myth Wukong coming out. Excited to play it.
Yeah.
Weird streamer stuff. Notwithstanding. All right.
Indeed.
Indeedy doodles. Other big thing, Gamescom is next week. There's a lot of stuff that's supposed to show up, but one thing we know we're not seeing is Silksong at Opening Night Live.
Yeah.
Which I love that we're at the point now where preemptively Jeff Keighley is going, it's not going to be there to prevent the
Is that better or is that
onslaught.
worse?
It's also not going to be at the next Gamescom.
Or the next one. Or the next one.
I'm so curious what Silksong is going, how it's going right now, because I think like this game was announced pretty immediately after the first game, so
They're out to lunch for the past 13 years.
This may like be a little bit cliche to say, but it's becoming the next like Half-Life 3 of like, when is this coming out?
Boy.
it's more real though. Like we know Silksong exists. So I'm certain this game is going to come out at some point, but it has to have gone through some like wild amounts of rework or something to have taken this long. And we have no indication of when it's actually coming out. I think we saw it first time a couple years back at the Xbox showcase. It was like everything will be out around a year from now, and that it was one of the things in that list and has not come out. So I have to assume at some point they were confident it was going to come out in like 2023, and it just hasn't for whatever reason. So no, I'm hoping that it releases and is good.
Well.
All right.
Yeah.
Other Gamescom stuff. Expect a lot of news from a lot of things. That's just we'll probably talk about it after Gamescom has happened. It's sort of now with E3 gone. I think it's the next biggest game related thing, aside from Summer Game Fest, arguably. But this is definitely still the like next biggest industry event. So hopefully we'll have some cool news out of this. That and I think Tokyo Game Show are the two big showcases that are still around. So I'm excited for whatever comes out of it.
And we'll probably have some weird cringy shit to talk about too.
Absolutely. As we should.
Boy.
It wouldn't be a conference without that. Okay. Well, that's the games news that I had to talk about, unless someone can think of something that I'm forgetting. But I think that's everything. Which means let's go into what we've been playing lately and talk about some actual video games. Does that sound good?
Oh, they have to have actually existed for us to talk about it? Oh, I had no
Yeah,
idea.
Not a fever dream.
yeah, you
I
can't
can't
have
talk about my ideal Transformers game yet.
no NyQuil fueled fever dreams here.
I can't talk
Fever
about I can't talk about the game idea that I ranted to a friend about when we were at a bar at 2 a.m. What are you talking
Well,
about?
no, that's different. We
That's what
can
I'm
talk
here to
about
talk
that. We
about.
just can't say we've played it.
What about Allegra Chicken?
We've really gone off the rails here. I need to reel us back in a little bit. First of all, I'm going to mention what we were out, why we didn't have the podcast the last time, was I was over in Gen Con, which, for people that don't know, big tabletop gaming convention. I think it's technically the biggest like consumer side games convention there is. Felt huge, bigger than any PAX that I've been to, though of course I have not been to what E3 was before it closed down, so I'm not sure if it's bigger than that. huge convention, tons of board game stuff all over the place, very fun, great like 4-day event. And got to play and see a lot of cool new board games and whatnot and tabletop-y stuff. So there's a bunch of stuff from that I want to talk about. But the main thing, and Alex, this is one that you're aware of, is a little tabletop game called Fabula Ultima, which I'm very excited to play, which is basically a JRPG take on something like Dungeons and Dragons. Like it's a tabletop role-playing game that is entirely themed after JRPGs. And the reason that's very interesting to me is because it's a tabletop game taking from a genre of video games, which I don't think has happened before as like a full take through. 'Cause it's very inspired by video games. It's got stuff like the setup of like right and left side for combat. So you've got the classic like your party on the left and the enemies on the right and all that. So
Fun.
really fun looking system. It's entirely based around like picking very simple character classes that have a bunch of cool abilities and then mixing and matching them. And you can basically make any archetype from a JRPG that I think you can think of. There's stuff like you can make a summoner from Final Fantasy. You could even make a Xenoblade blade and driver combo if you want to. If you really want to get in the weeds with some weird stuff. You can be a mech pilot and all this other crazy stuff. Yeah, very excited to run that. Especially because the way that our group is running it is very strange and odd, as we're doing what's called a West Marches inspired campaign, except we have 4 DMs instead of 1 and a bunch more people. So basically the idea is you have like a huge group of people and you say whenever someone wants to play, they put a message in the chat and then gather whoever is available and interested.
I've actually done something similar to this before. I played Pathfinder where it was one huge scenario, but there were like 3 or 4 groups of people
Yeah.
who were in different parts of
Ooh.
the scenario. It was really cool.
The way we're
actually.
handling it is I'm one of the DMs, and we have 3 more. Each of us is taking essentially a region of the world and fleshing that out, and then the player characters will be part of like an adventurers guild, and then they have to go do a job for each region, and they get a cool thing. So it's basically go play one with each of the DMs, and then we'll have a fun powwow. So yeah, it's a really cool setup. We haven't actually played yet. We've mostly just been doing prep, but I'm very excited to start. So hopefully that goes very well. All right.
Oh, I'm excited
Someone else
for
got
it.
something?
Well, while we're talking about, actually, wasn't expecting to talk about this, but since we're talking about tabletop games,
Take it away.
yeah, right. My girlfriend introduced me to a game that her and her roommate have been playing called Here to Slay, where the goal is like, oh, you're all mercenaries and you head out into the woods and you have to kill these creatures, right? And so how it works is each person takes a turn playing, and you can set down a bunch of heroes that all have different effects that you can try and roll for. So it could be like stealing other people's cards or doing this or that. You can equip them with items, and you can try and screw over like other players, or you can try and attack one of the monsters and stuff like that. And the goal is to either get one of each type of hero. So there's paladin, there's fighter, there's whatever, or kill 3 of the creatures. And there's a lot of moments where like if you try and do a certain action, another player can put down a challenge card, and you both roll dice to see if they prevent you from doing that action or something like that. It's really, really fun. And it's a great party game just because there's a lot of screwing each other over and a lot of at least with the group that I play with, I say this lovingly, there tends to be a lot of shit talking going on.
Of course, as
Of
there
course.
should be.
Of course. And it's really cute because the whole aesthetic is like it's these adorable little creatures.
What was
so like
the name of the game again?
Here to Slay.
Mm.
Very fun.
There's tons of expansions for it. The art style is really cute. It's a bunch of little like animals. So like all of the fighters are bears, all of the thieves are like little cats and stuff like that. It's really cute, and it's really, really well made. And it's very compact and very cheap, which is also nice because card games and board games can get
Oh, they can
ludicrous.
get up there.
It can get ludicrous. So if you're looking for a fun, like kind of multiplayer, quick little card game, I highly recommend it. It's a lot of fun.
That's perfect.
Yeah.
Love to hear that. All right, Alex, you got something you want to mention?
Should I start with the one that we put in the title?
Hey, this is your pick. Go with whatever you want.
Let's kick it off with the headliner. Um, oh boy, I can't believe we haven't talked about the Elden Ring DLC.
Yeah,
That's
Shadow of
been
the Erdtree's
crazy
been
to
out
me.
for a little while, and we
I've been talking
really...
about it so much. I feel like it should have spilled over.
Well, I
into
think
the
this is you and
podcast
I
by
have
now.
talked about it so much that it feels like we have talked about it on the
I think-
podcast, but
I think we
we
like
did,
briefly mentioned
we
when
did a
people were
super
talking about
brief
difficulty.
mention. And that was like right when we had first started it. Obviously, it's been like a month. We've played a lot more of it. I don't think either of us has finished it, Alex, unless you can correct me. If
Oh
I'm
no,
wrong.
I'm stuck on the final boss.
As a lot of people are. And we won't give any spoilers for like the actual boss beyond what has been shown in trailers. But yeah, it's, I would say, some of the best stuff they've put out. I don't know if you would agree with that, Alex.
I
Very curious.
overall yes, but my general critique for it still is that it still carries some of the trademark from Soft Problems and dials them up to 11 as well. Along with its, I think it does a phenomenal job of the open world design because it's so, with the size of the map, it's so compact. It almost always hits that, like less than 45-second.
I honestly think like I
rate
would
for
have
that.
enjoyed base Elden Ring more if the map was more like this, where it had less
Yes.
open space and
Yeah.
more dungeony type things with a big variety around them.
Yeah.
It kind of feels like the whole map is basically a big legacy dungeon, which is great. I love that.
God, just today, I've been playing pretty much since the game came out. Just today, I was finally able to find my way down into the bottom of the map, where it's like this. How much can I say about this? Can I say general theming of it?
Yeah, I mean, just don't full spoil things, right?
Yeah.
So
There's like a really cool haunted forest with stealth mechanics in it, where you can really explore those because they've been in the game for a while. Who's really used them up until this point? It's all been strength builds and
I feel like most people
sorcerers,
use them
as
at the
far as
very
I can
start
see.
and then never again.
Exactly, and this area really brings them to light, along with other dungeons that I'm trying to spoil this as little as possible. That certain tools that you've, like, quote unquote tools as they're called in the game, that you find in the base game can be very helpful for maneuvering some puzzles and just giving you an extra solution for stuff. I thought that was a very fun
Yeah.
callback.
I will say, I think Shadow of the Erdtree does test the limits of my patience when it comes to FromSoft puzzle design.
The puzzle
Um,
design, I still detest the quest design because of how hard it is to find people. The camera is
I think,
still
yeah, I'd actually say I
absolutely
had an easier time with the
bonkers
quests
bad.
in Shadow of the Erdtree, or at least like following the quest lines through to the end. At least the ones that I found, but much harder of a time finding specific areas. There's a lot of areas in Shadow of the Erdtree where you're like expected to know to do specific gestures, which
Yeah,
I think
that's
it works
bizarre.
fine if you go to them immediately after, like, some NPC will tell you, oh, you should go do this in this area. But the nature of the map means it's really hard to have those two things happen in sequence, where you can't, like, it's often very difficult to have an NPC tell you that and then know where you're supposed to go. So you end up exploring and getting lost and then forgetting what they said.
My first playthrough, I missed 2 full NPCs.
I still don't know how you missed. What was it? Talia was the one you missed the first time?
How do you not know how I missed Tholier? He's so out of the way.
He
of
was the
his weird
first
little
NPC
side
I
path.
found.
That's bonkers.
For anyone else. But yeah, I mean, it's super cool. I think the place that they put this DLC being behind Mogwin's palace in the base game is super
Something you're
weird.
expected to be level 154.
Yeah, you're expected to be basically end of the game to enter this DLC, and I like that on a first run through because it is satisfying to like play through the game and then go into this. But Shadow of the Erdtree is like the most branching thing that they've done, and going back through the game to play it again is a thing that I just don't see myself doing.
I've grown to hate Limgrave over the years. I liked it on my first and second playthrough, and now it's just, well,
Yeah,
I'm
because
here
like
again.
Elden Ring is so big of a game that unlike like Dark Souls 3, it's pretty easy to start it and then catch up to where you were. without a huge amount of effort being put into that. Shadow of the Erdtree, especially in Elden Ring proper, that's not the case. There's a lot of repeat content you have to do, and even just like getting to a specific level. Like this is the first time where I'd just be tempted to like take my character save and redo it, right, and just like reset my progress and the DLC. But yeah, that's like a minor gripe. I feel like most people probably wouldn't replay the DLC anyway. They're gonna play it once and be done with it. And it's really good for that. So I think it's a great pickup. It is basically the size of a full game, if not two, depending on what we're talking about. But and great bosses.
I do remember some people. I do remember seeing some people saying like $40 for DLC is insane. First of all, that's not that.
It's pretty regular expansion
rare.
price for MMOs or other things, right? Like
also if it's FromSoft, if it's like a FromSoft DLC for Elden Ring, it's probably gonna be pretty freaking big, anyways. I don't know.
I have to yes but you on the boss design, right? Because this is also partially a camera problem as well.
Oh, we're gonna get to the camera in a minute, Alex.
But my God,
that pain groan I think says everything.
He can't even speak.
They have patched this. They have patched this issue for only one boss, and it's optional. 75% of the other bosses still do this. Where they give you literally no time whatsoever. They just immediately lunge right at you or launch right into an attack right out of the gate. They don't give you time to get summons off, which for me, as a player with some, trouble with motion things, I like having summons. It's a tool the game lets me use. Why isn't it letting me use them? They're still there. It's just punishing me for trying to get them off.
Also, there's some other problems with that too. Of like, I think a lot of people have made fun of the Dark Souls like slow walking to you in the boss arena, but it adds a lot of gravitas to fights.
Yeah,
just from a thematic
there's also
point.
There's also not enough cinematics for the bosses too. Some of them just got done dirty. I really feel like some of them should have had more of an intro.
I mean, that probably goes to DLC. That's a DLC budget thing, I would guess, and not a problem with proper game. But I do think like the camera here is not great in some of the fights. Like a big one is the Dancing Lion, which is like the fight that everyone was gushing about initially.
Awful. I hate flailing beast enemies in every FromSoft game. They are
so it's not like an awful fight, but the problem is like the boss's moves are relatively readable on their own, but the camera, most beast bosses have two lock-on points where they'll have one on like their head and one on their butt, right? So you can, when they're like standing up or something and getting real tall,
that's the most important lock-on.
You can, hey, Souls logic, always stick to the butt. It's 90% of the time the correct answer.
That's where the boar isn't armored.
I learned something new every day.
It's the correct answer for the Dancing Lion too, and the problem is there's no lock-on point on the butt. Despite you being able to hit it, you can hit the butt, you just can't lock onto it. Which means when it does its weird thing where it stands up on its back legs and is just fully extended into the air, your camera goes straight up.
Listen, sometimes you can touch, but you can't look, okay?
All right, Wyatt. Love that you're adding yourself live on the podcast. All right.
I'm trying.
But yeah, I find it astounding that throughout all FromSoft games, they have never managed to improve the camera. From what I've seen, and it's gotten worse with how more active bosses are.
Yeah, I mean it is particularly bad here, because there's a lot of bosses that'll do the thing where they like jump up and then run behind you, and that really causes
not
problems
only
with the camera.
Forces your camera up, it does the little like where it just tries to flip around, and it makes you really sick if you're like me. Unfortunately,
it's not great.
Don't be like me.
This was the Souls thing where I think I found myself most wanting the Monster Hunter type of lock on, which is like it doesn't actually lock on, but you target the enemy and then when you press the button, it snaps your camera to them, and just sits it there. I feel like that would have helped a lot during a lot of this, and I feel like doesn't.
Well, it's also this. There's also a lot of huge bosses in this DLC as well, and I found that in my experience with Souls games, it for human-sized enemies and things like that, it's best to lock on for them. They're gonna have they're gonna be within the physics of Souls for that kind of stuff. For larger enemies, you want to strike a balance of locking on and not locking onto them, because usually there's not going to be a lock on spot where you actually want to hit them. There's things like that. They're going to force the camera to do weird stuff. But then if you don't lock onto them and they're still really fast, you can't move the camera fast enough to keep up with them before they
Camera's
just
weird.
smash you from behind.
The gist of this is like, I think the gist of the problem is that the camera does not move in a way that enables you to react fast enough to most of what's going on and still be able to see what's happening for a lot of the bosses. And there's a couple in particular that really stand out. Like the dancing lion was a big one for me. And there's a couple of dragon bosses. One of them, all the other ones, every other one you can lock onto the legs. There is one of the dragon enemies that you cannot lock onto the legs. You only lock onto the head. And that's bad because you can't hit the head. So it's that fight was infuriating because you just can't, like, there is a way for me to do much better, which is just to hit the thing that I can reach.
Could you
and the
lock
game wouldn't let me
onto the
lock on.
legs right before Big Boy?
I don't know which big boy you're referring to. There's a lot of them.
Can I just say the name then?
Every other
name
dragon
is
in that
really-
area you could, except for one. So
Okay.
there was absolutely everything else you could lock onto things that made sense. There was one dragon that you could not. Great thing is
Also
that dragon
has-
is optional. You don't need to fight it, so I didn't.
Speaking of that dragon, oh boy, some of the best quest dialogue from one man in particular.
Oh, that's not the dragon that I was talking about. As the bad
Oh,
one.
okay.
No, I was talking about the
I'm
one
talking-
before it. That's like the optional one. But
Yes. Wait. Can you just run past him?
yes, I haven't killed
Oh
it.
my god.
I never
Oh
killed
my-
it in my playthrough. I just walked right past that guy. And into
still
the
haven't,
proper boss.
I still haven't adjusted to the mindset of enemies can be oh my god, what's the phrase? Brett used this before. Environmental hazards instead of things you're actually supposed to fight.
And
I
this
feel the
Shadow of
need
the
to
Erdtree
fight
definitely
every,
runs
like-
with that idea of like, there's a
Yeah.
lot of bosses here that you don't need to fight. Like Dancing Lion's another one of them. You can fight it really early. It's one of the first accessible ones, and it's not crazy hard, but it's also, you don't have to do it, right? I think a lot of people, when they went into this with the Shadow Tree blessings and like hadn't gathered them and whatnot and got walled up at the Dancing Lion or the first other boss, it was just because
They
they didn't
took
know
to
they
Reddit
could
and
keep
complained.
going. Yeah, there's a lot of complaining about that. I'd actually say I don't typically agree with a lot of the feedback that this is the hardest stuff that FromSoft has done. I do think there are some fights here that are like the hardest things they've done, but the majority of it, especially the
The
mainline
least
stuff,
forgiving, I would say.
yeah, least forgiving is very fair. But it's not super, like, the execution gap here. If you can do the base game, you can probably do 95% of the stuff in this one. I've heard, I haven't reached the final boss yet, but I've heard that there's something else. So
Oh yeah.
I'm aware that one
Yeah.
is probably going to be a wall, but everything else has been relatively achievable so far. There's tons of cool, like, puzzly encounters. The Forge Giants are really fun to fight and have these crazy, like, mechanics of, like, you need to stagger them a bunch to be able to hit them for a big damage hit, which is super fun. You've got the like all these shadow enemies all around the map that are just basically like meat blobs that you need to
Brawl,
smash.
yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot of cool themes here. There's some of the best humanoid boss fights I think that Elden Ring has had. I think both the first boss with the twin swords and later on Big Boy, all 18 inches of Mesmer the Impaler.
Yeah.
I think that
Treat
fight might
yourself.
be like my favorite fight in the franchise right now, just because of how balanced and fun it felt. But yeah,
It was
there's a lot of really good stuff.
until I made it to the haunted mansion. I gotta tell you.
Look, I'll get
Madness
there
Boy is my
eventually,
new
Alex.
favorite.
The problem is I can't find it. All right.
I can
that-
now lead you to it. I know the way.
That's the other, and I don't want to say this is a problem because I actually do like it, but I do think the Shadow of the Erdtree, it's very difficult to sometimes find areas, because there's a few things again that are like locked behind gestures or other insane things. Um, which yeah, that's fun to a degree. It's hard to track here, especially because the story's told a little bit more directly. Sometimes I just want to continue that, and it's a little hard to reach the areas I'm going to. But otherwise, very fun. I do think this also has a strong cast of characters, but I'm sad Melina has like literally nothing to say this whole expansion.
Yeah. I don't know why.
Yeah, it's weird because there's a lot of different ways to play through the game, and there are ways to have her with you in this expansion, and she just says nothing. She just doesn't do anything, which is very strange. There's a lot of just like lore things that are weird here about that, where it's like, oh, I feel like this could have been the opportunity to expand on stuff from the base game, but they just don't bring like anything from the base game in here.
The one thing they do, I guess, kind of, is they elaborate on the jars.
Yeah, they like elaborate on lore, but they don't like. Nothing affects the base game. Everything you do in Shadow of the Erdtree is contained separate to Shadow of the Erdtree, which is fine, but definitely feels odd that you have to, for a thing that you have to make a character get to level 150-ish or slightly below it, and reach the Mogwin's Palace to enter. At that point, I would almost be inclined to just make this like spin-off, right? Like, I don't think anything would be different.
It's like not even Sir Gideon Ofnir, the all-knowing, has anything to say about the DLC at all.
Yeah, which was weird because he like has stuff to say about everyone. So I would have like, if I were on the production committee for this, I would have pushed for like some level of bringing a couple of people back to just like record lore lines about this.
Again, might have just been a time constraint or
which is like understandable. It's just it stands out because everything else is so good that we're nitpicking, right? Sure. But overall, I would definitely say this is one of the best DLCs I've ever played. I think that's pretty easy to say. It's very good. It's a very good DLC. It's hard, absolutely, as you would expect, and it's lengthy. The reason I haven't finished it is not because it's too hard. It's because it's very long. I've got other games I wanted to play. Dawn Trail came out, and I was like, sorry, bud, I gotta go do that.
If you're anything like me, which somehow, you take 5 hours over the completionist time to just finish the main story of a game.
I do that all the time, Alex. You're not alone.
Then this is definitely, at least 40 more hours at the
bare
minimum.
Your average playthrough would be 40 hours, if not longer. I think I've already spent like 45 or so, and I'm not anywhere near finishing. So I would be pretty confident in saying that you could get 100 hours of extra time out of this DLC with just by exploring and doing all the other cool things. Other minor thing I really like, lots of really cool mini dungeons here, and a lot of varied ones. You have like cool jails, cool like ice dungeons, there's some jar themed ones. There's like forges that have smith script stuff, which is weapons that you can throw that are very fun.
I still need to find the shield. Oh, that's
I want to find the shield. There's like really cool weapon archetypes. I think the best movesets that have ever been in a Souls game.
Oh, yes! The martial arts as a weapon.
Martial arts are rad.
I am in love with those. Oh, they are so fun, and they are stagger machines.
Yeah, martial arts is great. That's what I thought would be my favorite. My favorite's actually the light greatsword, because I think, like when I read that, I was like, oh, light greatsword, that's the most boring thing when you've got like dueling shields and all this other cool stuff to add in. But the light greatswords are super fun because they have like crazy HEMA style moves where they're actually doing proper stance work and stuff, and like they feel just like a really cool animation set. And very functional. They're like fast and pokey and very fun to use, and they flow into combos really well. Like they feel kind of a lot like Geralt's moveset from Witcher 3, but a little bit more grounded. Not quite as like spinny as Geralt, but yeah, super cool, very fun. All the weapons are good. The spells have been weird. This continued the trend of FromSoft making a bunch of spells that are really awesome but super underpowered. Thankfully they've buffed a bunch of them now, and so it should be more possible to play a spell build using the cool like new mesmer incantations you get that are like, there's like a crazy Rain of Fire one that's like the Rain of Stars from base camp but for flames.
I can't wait to get Mesmer's Spear for my Dex character. That's gonna be ridiculously fun. If you see his like you just get his moveset. You literally get his moveset as the.
It's super cool. They really went all out with this one. So yeah, I think it's great fun to be had. All right, let's move on from the Elden Ring DLC because I think Wyatt is stewing in his corner.
Oh
as we've
yes.
taken over the
I don't
show
know
to
what you're
become
talking
FromSoft
about.
podcast for a little while.
Hey, go off, man. Go off. You
We went
know,
off.
more
We
power
we
to
went off
you.
for like 20 whole minutes.
And now you're on.
Well, we're going from one game that both of you have played to a game that both Ryan and I have played, and I was kind of shocked that we forgot to actually put this in the title.
Yeah, I think I know where you're going.
Wayfinder.
Yep.
Let's talk about Wayfinder.
So we
So-
intended, the reason we didn't talk about Elden Ring is the episode we did in between that releasing and this was a talk about early access, which the reason we wanted to do that was to talk about Wayfinder. And then we
forgot
didn't.
to talk about Wayfinder.
We went off
Which
on too
is
many
not-
tangents.
Which, to be clear, says nothing on the game's quality at all. That's just us being goobers.
Yeah, I do definitely want to say, like, Wayfinder is a really interesting case study for a bunch of stuff. For those who don't know, it's Airship Syndicate. They've done a few Darksiders games. They're led by a couple of the original Darksiders creators. They did the like ARPG kind of Darksiders one. They did League of Legends Ruined King, which is the like League of Legends JRPG style thing. They did Battle Chasers, which is an awesome like turn-based RPG thing that it just has a rad art style. Lots of fun stuff. Fun like double A setup. Wayfinder itself was an MMO published by Digital Extremes with Airship developing. Digital Extremes, the launch went real bad. DE decided they didn't want to be publishers anymore. Like bad enough to where he's like, I was there at the launch. I was very excited for this game. I was into it. I love Warframe, so I was like, DE is backing something. I'm like, I'll check that out. Airship Syndicate developer I like, so I'm sure I'll enjoy this. Couldn't play the game for like 2 weeks.
Oh god.
I think I got in for like 1 hour at one point. And it's fun. Like it's a really good game. But the MMO stuff didn't work. It was meant to be a free-to-play MMO. It had all the trappings of Warframe, but in a game that I think just doesn't lend itself to what Warframe is. Because Warframe's combat is like so fast-paced and so frenetic that it really works in that free-to-play world. I think Wayfinder is definitely a little bit slower and a little bit more like puzzly almost. In a way that I really like. Like, I love playing Wayfinder, but I think I love it much more now that it is an ARPG and, like, a proper action game compared to being an MMO.
Because I didn't play during this MMO state. I just heard that, hey, no one can play it right now, so I was like, okay, it's probably not worth checking out, and I completely forgot about it. But now that I'm playing it in this new kind of refresh that they're doing, I can't imagine this game as an MMO. I genuinely have no idea how that would have worked.
Yeah,
I mean, apparently it didn't,
strange.
but
but yeah, now it's a fully co-op, offline or online if you want to play it with other people. Dungeon crawler basically with open world stuff, and like Wyatt and I played a bunch of this together. It was a great time.
Yeah, it's really cool. I'm not super familiar with this like ARPG dungeon crawler thing. I've been dabbling over the past few years, but I'm by no means an expert. But no, this was really cool. I really loved being able to switch between all these different characters that could have completely different builds, and you didn't have to like go to any central town or log out and log into a new character. You can just swap right in the inventory, which was a really fun idea. It kind of almost gives you this feeling that you're traveling with a group, but you can only control one person at a time, which is kind of fun. Love the art style. It is a
gorgeous
looking.
When we talk about
game.
this, I think we had mentioned that like this looks like what Arcane the show looks like, but in a video game.
Oh
like,
yeah.
It is, I think, my favorite version of like that stylized, loosely cartoony, but still really high fidelity look.
Yeah.
And I hope more games take an art style like this because I think it looks.
It has almost like a super modernized like World of Warcraft aesthetic.
Yeah, like
if
World of Warcraft mixed with
was
like,
made
the
today.
look.
Yeah, if World of Warcraft was made today, it would probably look somewhere.
I mean, honestly,
to this, I feel like.
I do have to caveat when we mention World of Warcraft. I work at Blizzard, not on WoW, but on Diablo. And nothing I say is reflective of Blizzard as a company. It's all my own thoughts. With WoW,
sorry to make you do that. It's just it's.
Well, look, I was gonna have to say it later anyway because I want to talk about Path of Exile, which is an ARPG, so I gotta give a whole spiel when I do that. But yeah, if you look at like WoW's newer cutscenes, it's a very similar style, and it's gorgeous. Like they look really good in both games. So, yeah, Wayfinder really fun. Like it's a fun. You have 4 abilities and a weapon ability. You get the 4 abilities are character based. Weapons are mix and match, so you can pick any weapon you want with any character. though some characters have slightly better things with certain weapons. Like there's a Silo as a character Wyatt and I both played a bunch of. He's got a bunch of bombs, and he has like a little robot that can fight with him as his ultimate. And he is kind of geared toward using guns, but you can totally use other things. Crazy thing we learned midway through playing, we found a skill tree. Neither of us knew this existed for like the first hour and a half of us playing the game.
We're like,
It's a cool skill tree. It's got a bunch of stuff, and we're like, oh, there's like some cool bonuses in here. I'm sure they don't have a different one for every hero because it's kind of big. It was big enough that I was like, oh, they probably didn't make one for each individual.
This is like a skill tree for like a full like game on its own.
Yeah, like this would be a Far Cry skill tree, right? Like it's big enough for it. And then we changed characters. Every single one of them has their own with like all these cool bonuses and stuff and different ways to play.
And they're all leveled. Oh, I keep hitting the mic. They're all leveled the same, so you don't have to like do a bunch of dungeons and grind as a particular character to get them up to snuff with the other characters. No. They just all level up together, which again comes back to that idea of they really want you to use multiple characters in a dungeon.
Yeah,
it's really
they do have like individual character levels, but that's more about your ability unlocks and stuff, and not the skill tree itself, which is a lot of passive things or things that like key off of abilities. But then they also had like weapon masteries that give them bonuses when using certain types of weapons, and you get one for each weapon. So it's always like, if you want to play with this style, you can use a sword and shield, or you can go for like heavy two-handed or guns or this if you want to do that. And just really cool systems here that I think are like, they're relics of when it was an MMO, but they're relics that make it a really deep action RPG in a way that a lot of other dungeon crawlers like this are not. So
plus really solid player housing to the extent of like there's a whole vendor just for like selling like decor. Basically it's in a bunch of rewards for quests and various like assignments and stuff like that. And the editor, even with a controller, the editor is really slick and easy to use and well made, but still gives you a ton of options to kind of rotate things in specific ways if you want to put them on certain, wherever. It's really well made.
Yeah.
I spent a ton of time with that.
I think just the like note from it is it really feels polished. It's still in early access as of now, though I believe it's intending to release sometime this year or early next year. After this whole pivot from MMO, I think like Airship Syndicate also did a really good interview with MinMax very recently. If you want to hear more about like why they made the decisions that they did, it's super interesting. It basically boils down to like when DE pulled out and they lost publishing funds, they had to do a decision, right? Like it was either going to be we cut the game, move on to something else immediately, and just cut our losses with it, or we got to change it into something that we don't need a publisher for. They made a decision to like, they pulled all the microtransactions. Everything that was a microtransaction became a loot drop. So everything, all the armor sets that they had made is like skins that are gorgeous. Like they're very good looking, even though the base stuff is great. There's tons of really cool skins for characters, and you get those as armor drops that now have stats tied to them. Of course, with a full transmog system, so you don't need to have the stats that you like, but armor that you don't. You can mix and match as you wish, and it's really good systems here. And yeah, I'm excited for it to get its final content drops. I think it's the last thing that they're really waiting on is they're adding a third of the open world portions. There's one that's in like a forest wilderness. That's the starter one. There's an icy one that I haven't unlocked yet. And then I know the third one is going to be something called the Crucible, I think is what it's called. So I'm excited to see what that is when it comes out, as well as their own bosses and stuff that come with that region. So,
yeah, no, very well made overall. I definitely want to play more. My two issues right now is like, it feels like they're so close to launch. I kind of want to just wait until the whole thing launches and then really get into it. And the other thing is, like, as I've said before in the last few episodes, I'm going through such a big sci-fi kick at the moment that it's hard for me to stick with something that isn't sci-fi at the moment.
Super fantasy. Yeah.
Yeah. Really good fantasy. I love a fantasy game that has a mix of like, oh, it's swords and magic and stuff. There's also guns though, and that's also cool.
Yeah, character focused around bombs. It's great.
Yeah, why not? I like that mix of like medieval fantasy, but also having like early kind of technology.
Yep.
I
Which is
always
weird
thought was
because
kind
we
of
talked about
fascinating.
another game that you picked, Wyatt, was Immortals of Avium, which we
Yep.
played for the last round of Game Pass games. This reminds me of that type of like setting, but I think handled much better with a
Yeah.
much
Yeah.
nicer like aesthetic than Avium had.
Yeah. I agree. I agree.
Yeah, it's a
Yeah.
cool kind of comparison.
No,
Uh,
I think if you're looking for, because I know actually a fair few people who I think would really like ARPGs, but don't really like the kind of top down or isometric look to it, and they want something a bit more like over the shoulder third person action. And I think would be right up their alley. I think that's a surprising amount of people kind of fit in that
yeah, I mean, there's a
area.
real
You know?
like a lot of the reasoning behind the different decisions are like a traditional ARPG being that isometric camera gives you a lot more space to look at, and you kind of
Mhm.
like can handle knowing at what's any point of your screen at any time. Your abilities can be a
Here's one
little bit
thing
more bombastic because you don't
that
need to.
Yeah, that is one thing I'll say.
Yeah,
Sometimes there was a boss, if I think Ryan knows the one I'm talking about, where it got so chaotic that it was actually difficult to
yeah, we felt
see.
like a cool slime boss that did a ton of really cool things. Super fun boss.
Hmm.
There's a
Yep.
point where it like drops a ton of explosive slimes all around you. The problem is you can't see the ones behind you. So,
Oh.
Yes. And when
uh,
you've got abilities popping off at the same time, it's a bit like when you play Hades and you're so late into the game that there's so many VFX going everywhere that you can't tell what's
it's
happening.
often like
It's a
when people
similar thing.
wonder why MMOs, like a lot of people playing MMOs, pull their camera so far back. It's so they can see. That's
Yeah.
the reason.
Yeah.
Is so
That's
they
the
can see
reason.
as much. While still want the cool VFX, but they don't want to have their screen obscured by everything going on. So yeah, I think that's definitely fair. All right. Any other thoughts on Wayfinder before we move on?
I did want to mention the dungeons you go into, randomly generated, but you can add some cool mods to it. There's a really fun one where there's like 6 times the amount of like gold pickup that you normally have, but every time you pick up gold, enemies become slightly stronger. So it's this cool trade-off of
Hmm.
like, do you like, it's a really good way to pick like, oh, I need more gold to, buy something or do whatever I need to do, so I can activate this specific modifier. But in doing so, in engaging with that, it makes enemies more difficult, which I thought was really fun.
Yeah.
And also the modifiers aren't just things you pick; you have to craft them or find them, which I thought was an interesting idea.
Yeah,
I
they
need
all
to,
like the more you use, the more XP and stuff you gain while you're going
yeah,
through.
I need to kind of play around with that more. I want to know how that works more, but it's a very interesting system where you can't just spam the same 2 mods every time. It's based off of what you have on you, which I found
Yeah,
kind
it's
of
also the dungeons are
interesting.
like super replayable because they're all there's not very
Mhm,
many in the game. I think there's maybe like six or so that
mhm.
each have their own boss and everything, but they're all very replayable and they have like selections of stuff you can do because you run them with these different modifiers and you'll get like different encounters and different stuff in them.
It's
Um,
based on rooms, so like rooms
yeah,
will be the same, but they're all, they kind of fit together
it's sort of
differently.
very much like a roguelike, right?
Yeah.
But the rest of the game is not roguelike at all, or like the original
Although,
Diablo and stuff like that. But
well, if they wanted to add a roguelike mode to this game, that'd be kind of sick.
they totally could. Yeah, it would work.
That'd be sweet.
Yeah,
No, really, really good, super polished for early access with a ton of content. This is one of those like Valheim situations where if it came out now as like a full price game, I don't know if a lot of people would be complaining that much, or some people may not even notice. It's really, really well made, and
yeah.
I'm
I
really
really hope it
excited
finds some
for the
big
1.0.
success with 1.0.
Yeah.
Excuse me, with 1.0 because I think it's really enjoyable and fun in its current state. It's also just filling a market that I think there isn't much in. Because like you and I were talking about this, how it feels kind of like Lord of the Rings: War in the North, or those other like Baldur's Gate: Dark Alliance, the bad one.
Uh,
I love mentioning that game because it's not very good, but it
Oh,
definitely
I think
is
I
like
played that one before. I think
yeah,
I
it
had
was
a
on Game Pass for a
friend.
while.
Yeah. Oh, no, not Dark Alliance. Oh God, it was a different. I'm thinking of something else, but yes, very similar. Also.
Yeah, I just bring it up because it's like one of those games that's like co-op, third person, not isometric, sort of action RPG, loot crawler, and I think Wayfinder is of those types of games the best one that I have played, uh, by a pretty significant margin.
Mm.
Just because a lot of the games that have tried to do this have not been great. So I think Wayfinder is a really good shot at it, and I hope they get a lot of success with 1.0.
And it's a nice heartwarming story of like a game that came out in a fashion that it probably should not have released in, but the developers were able to kind of reverse that
And to say, like,
and
when the
have a
game
second
released,
chance.
everything worked except for the servers. Like,
Well,
everything
that's
else was
that's the
great.
thing. That's why I say like the game itself was pretty solid, but it was released in a fashion that it should not have been released in. It seemed like it wasn't really supposed to be this like MMO light experience. So I'm glad that
Yeah.
they're able to kind of reverse that. They did what a lot of players were probably imagining at the time is like, oh, if this wasn't like an always online situation, it would probably be a lot better. And I'm really glad that it was able to kind of have that transformation because it's really, really well made.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, Alex, you got anything waiting in the wings that you want to burstingly vent your soul
I
about?
I do. It's not too much new information, but I did revisit Enshrouded after a while because there's been a good few updates since we last played.
Yeah.
And oh boy, there's a giant floating castle on the map. So that's neat. Haven't made it there yet.
To say for people that don't know what Enshrouded is, Alex, you want to give
Oh,
them the
right, yeah.
pitch?
It is a what are we talking? Open world light survival game, right?
Yeah,
More
definitely not
it's
like super survival mechanic focused, but
Yeah.
yeah, it has a pretty nice building system to it that I haven't played Val. Is it similar to Valheim's?
no,
It's
not at all. It's voxel based in this one. Valheim
okay.
is a very different building system, but very
Also
high
very good, but
detail.
very different. Yeah.
We got that. It's trying to figure like it's survive. I feel like its main focus is world
Yeah, like
exploration,
adventuring, sort
light
of
on
that
combat as well.
Zelda-y type of adventure, dungeon crawling.
Mhm.
Yeah. And they've had a bunch of updates recently. Well, not recently, throughout since when we played, but also yes, recently. Wow, I'm rambling. Um, the most recent of which was one where they overhauled a bunch of mechanics. They made setting. They really went into the settings. There's a very very customizable difficulty
Nice.
Which I
now.
will say,
that you
I
can-
was able to tune it to play like Dynasty Warriors, which is an insane thing to say, but it worked. So,
Oh my god.
because they let you tune how many enemies spawn, but they also let you tune the health of enemies. So I basically
Oh
boosted the
yes.
health of bosses, lowered the health of regular enemies, and then maxed out their spawn rate. And then boosted player stats to be like a Dynasty Warriors character, and played Enshrouded Dynasty Warriors, and it was very
We're
fun.
big
Did
fans
it?
of
Did
customizable
you?
difficulty here.
Oh yeah.
Did you find like a weapon that made you feel like a Dynasty Warriors
No, I
character?
was just trying this out because I didn't really intend to keep playing, but I wanted to see if it was possible, and it was, and that made me very happy.
I'm so happy about that. And then I got to tell you, without changing the difficulty settings much, having it on the usual normal, I felt like I was being assaulted by a Dynasty Warriors amount of mobs in their new dungeons that they included in the game, which are oh dear God, something I'm forgetting the name of.
Yeah, the big like
Let's see.
hall, underground hall one that is
Yes, Hallowed
almost like
Halls.
a
That's what they're
yeah,
called.
yeah.
Yeah, they're
That's like the
much.
big lengthy encounter.
Yeah, they are much longer than than the little beacon towers that you can go through or your typical sort of like dungeon. They're maybe not like as much open exploration, but it felt like it was long enough that I was in there about the same time as like what the big capital city has to offer currently.
Hmm.
It was you go deep into the
And yeah,
ground, and
to
there's
just say
a
this for
good amount of
everyone who
enemies.
hasn't heard about Uncharted before, we did a big podcast about Uncharted. We talked a ton about it. Just was we all love it. Very good game. Doesn't feel like it's an early access, despite it being an early access.
And that's coming from three people who are at best indifferent to survival crafting
Yeah.
Yeah,
games.
like we like Valheim. That's about as far as it goes. I play 7 Days to Die relatively often, but I don't
Mm.
put on many of the hardcore things.
I actively roll my eyes whenever I see a cool looking game and it turns out that it's a survival crafting game. I will more often than not just like back out of whatever trailer I'm watching and do
Yeah,
anything
Enshrouded
else.
is a great take on survival crafting as a genre. Although
Absolutely.
I would say it feels more like an adventure game than a crafting survival game,
Yeah.
The
which is
crafting
my
stuff is
preference.
there. It's
So
there for flavor, as I've said before.
yeah,
More so
it's
than
really
anything
cool. You
else.
get to like collect NPCs and stuff too, which is always fun, and like build out a little town,
Gotta
which
catch them
great.
all.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah,
Oh,
gotta catch them all. This is
Along with
Power now.
oh
along
no!
with the other updates,
No!
they added oh god, what was it? Some like really fun quality of life decoration stuff like armor stands where you can now instantly like, swap from builds that you've made. They improved the crafting experience for a lot of the vendors along with their UI as well, so it's easier to
Hmm.
read and go through. It's it was really good when we were playing it, and it's stacking up to look more promising. The more updates they get, and I
Yeah.
still on their roadmap because they haven't changed it, and they've been knocking things out of the park so far for what they want. One of their last things on the wish list for the Enshrouded is to do water in a voxel game.
Which
They
is
want to add
wild.
water
Like
to the
Enshrouded
map.
is a wild game to try to add water to.
Well, because
So-
it feels like it's designed around not having any water at all.
Well, yeah, there's also like
That
there's
was
lore in
an
the world as to
intentional
why there
yeah.
isn't
decision.
water and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But yeah,
So
I'm
like
fascinated. I'm sure it would be beautiful if they can add it, but
so like are they gonna it's almost like they have their own little story arc within early access before like
yeah.
the actual game comes out. It's very strange.
That could be. I haven't found lore in any of the new stuff yet that would hint to things
I
like
don't know if
that,
it's
but I
actually in
will
the
probably
game or
see
on their
them.
website or something. There was like reasoning on their website as to why there's no water in the world. It's like the Shroud took it over or something. Um, but yeah, very fun game. I'm super excited to see what 1.0 is like when it comes around. It's still pretty early into the early access, I think, and they have a ways to go before they officially release because they wanted to add like 2/3 of the map into the game, which is insane because the map is already huge. So it's already got like 3 full biomes and everything too.
It is. It's crazy.
It's yeah, bonkers amount of content for an early access game.
It's a
Another one you could
huge
easily
game.
spend 100 hours in this game.
Yeah.
Yeah, very excited for the new stuff.
I really hope this gains because people were talking about it when it first came out, and I feel like people have kind of stopped talking about it. And so I really hope like either right before 1.0 or when 1.0 hits, it really gets that huge kind of
They
spotlight because it really
should bump
deserves
up the
it.
marketing for it. Oh, one more thing. They
I'm
also
going to finish the game first.
yeah.
Yeah,
They
I mean,
also
also, hey, they just announced this last week, Alex, but they hit 3 million players, so they're
yes, I saw the
obviously doing very
banner.
well.
Yeah.
Very
that
happy
considered,
about it.
So
They also what was they changed around the skill trees as well, you know, buffing, nerfing some abilities, rearranging things as well and adding more abilities, which love to
which
see
have
it.
fun skill tree too. There's a lot of cool stuff in there that's like new mechanical things you can do,
You have
which
your
I always
typical
love.
sort of like, you know, your mage, your archer and your fighter, and then in between those there's like arcane trickster, paladin, healer, things like it's the
You can do
mixing
things
and
like
matching
replace
is
your
really
dodge with
cool.
teleporting and stuff like that. The other cool things.
Yeah.
Yeah, great time.
Very fun
Alex,
game.
I need to get you to play Outward with me as well. It's another one of those games
I
in this
really
kind of
do.
territory.
I
So,
need to download that again on this computer now that I have plenty of
I've heard of that
space.
before.
yeah, it's
Um,
Outward's cool. They just announced Outward 2 a little while ago. It's basically it is a mixture of a Souls-like and a Morrowind-inspired RPG, where it's very much like you have the Morrowind ethos of the player character can do a lot of really different stuff in the game, and it's not going to judge you based on what you're doing. Like, it's not going to try to push you into any one path, but there's tons of options. There's a bunch of classes and lots of cool abilities. The coolest thing though is their like rune magic system is rad, where you basically like you can
Ooh.
play a mage, and the way you do it, at least one of the ways, because there's a few different magic classes, but the one that I like is rune crafting, which like you use abilities to stack runes, and then when you have like 2 fire runes and a lightning, you can shoot out a fire lightning orb and stuff like that, or call
Huh.
down like a crazy protective dome if you do a bunch of life stuff. It's been ages since I've played it, so do not take any of that as the actual steps to do those things, but they're possible. And
I'm
yeah,
looking
super fun
forward to
game.
this now.
It's
Yep,
the whole aesthetic is
downloading.
like you are a backpack carrying adventurer, and so you have like mechanics about carrying your backpack, and you like drop it down when you start a fight. Another gimmick with the game is that you can't actually die. There's not a way to actually like game over in Outward unless you, I think, turn on the setting to enable that. But typically, when you die, you'll be put into a situation based on where you are in the world and how you died. That will be like, oh, you got captured by bandits, or you got rescued by a kind stranger, and your pack was brought with you, and stuff. So you'll kind of start the game in different scenarios around the map if you pass out or something.
One
Very
of
cool
You
game.
lose
my
anything? So
one of
you
my
don't lose
favorite
anything when you
Skyrim
die?
mods.
So if you can lose stuff in your pack if it's like if someone took your pack, but typically you can always re-get it somehow. Like you would have to find it and re-equip it, but there's ways to mitigate that. You can own houses and stuff and like keep things in your houses and all that. Lots of camping mechanics. It's very fun. A little bit jank because it's definitely one of those like Euro jank. They're shooting a little bit above what the studio was capable of at the start.
But there's always charm in that, isn't
But
there?
there's charm in that. Like they added a
Yeah.
town building mechanic in one of the DLCs. It's
Oh my
now, I
God.
think, included in the game by default. So
Because why not? Why not?
It's fun. So yeah, I want to go back to that game too and get through the town building stuff. All right, I had a game to talk about that I think you all are going to cringe into your skulls when I mention, because everyone knows the skill tree, which is Path of Exile.
Aha.
Hey, this is a game where I have to say I work on Diablo. Nothing I say is reflective of Blizzard or other developers' opinions. It's all my own. But yeah, I've been playing a lot of ARPGs, as I do, being a person that works on Diablo, and very much have been loving Diablo Season 5, but I also love Path of Exile's Settlers of Calgar, known as the Boat League, because you have town building and you can send boats to do stuff. And it's also very fun. You've got a whole mechanism around like building out a little town with the loot that you acquire, and you add gold to it and like build out these new areas. And I think the setup is that we're building a town that is part of Path of Exile 2. It's kind of the idea is like this is one of the hub towns in PoE 2, which is not out yet. I think the closed beta is supposed to run at some point this year. I'm not sure when, but hopefully we hear more about that soon because I'm very excited. But yeah, it's been very fun. I think this league is very good. They've done a good job of like shoring up a lot of the problems with getting through the campaign. Like there's now a bunch of secrets in each of the campaign acts that you can unlock if you want to like do a little bit more campaign focused stuff and not just blitz through it. And that's really cool. There's the town building thing is really good at helping you level up because you can basically send boats to go do things when you are busy, and they'll go like get you loot of a specific type from different ports around the world as you're doing your own thing, or if you're offline, as long as you hit the gold to pay them.
Oh, that's
so
nice.
they'll go do stuff, and like I'll come back and be like, oh, I have a bunch of currency I can use now and stuff like that. Which is very cool, and they give you like good stuff too. Like as someone who doesn't typically do a lot of trading in PoE, and it's mostly a solo self-found or at least low trading player, it's very fun because it feels like I can build my own stuff a lot more reliably than I could in many other leagues. And yeah, just been very enjoyable so far. It still continues to have the problems that PoE had of like when you open the skill tree, it's a big hit in the face of oh boy. I have probably played about as much of the game as I have of the spreadsheet known as Path of Building, which is a tool outside of the game you use to build your character, so you know what you're doing when you go into it. Because I'm a very build crafty person and like to pick my own builds, which means I need to know the math, and that means I need to have spreadsheets. So I use
boy.
Path of Building
Get
nearly
your
as much.
sheets ready, boys.
Hey, it's fun for a while until it isn't anymore. But
Wow, this feels like a second job.
I mean, literally. When you work on an ARPG and then get home and play ARPGs, that's kind of what it feels like.
I'm to open up Microsoft Excel to see how I need to build my character.
I think it's really fun. There's a lot to like about it. I do think there are problems. I think the gold costs in the boat league and like the way that you handle the town building, they get really high really fast to the point where it kind of feels like I'm just using my gold to maintain the town and not actually upgrade it. Like I've kind of plateaued at where I can actually get it to before I even feel like I've made a ton of progress. There's still some stuff I have yet to unlock, and it's basically like, oh, I'm doing this and I'm getting it to the point that I can kind of have these things running, but now it costs me so much to run the town because you have to pay wages to your workers.
Oh,
And those wages get really high really fast, and so it kind of feels like you have to back off a bit. What I really wish they would do is just make it so that there's a bunch of things that are based on like you have to go out and mark ore and other things so that your miners know where to go to get their ore, and it runs out eventually. So I would love it if when it ran out, you didn't have to pay the miners for that time, and so they would like just hang around. Which it doesn't seem like that's how it works right now. I think they said that's supposed to be how it works, but I don't think it is. And a few other things. It gets very hard to have it running for more than a couple hours at a time, which is weird. If I like would want to upgrade it to do things while I'm offline, I kind of feel like I would want it to be able to run for a little while if I'm like taking a break for a few days. Which doesn't seem like what it's doing right now, and it also seems like I can't really continue to upgrade it without running out of gold very quickly on the amount of stuff that it's used for. So I've kind of hit a wall with that I think is maybe just like a weird progression thing. And once I get to higher map tiers, maybe that'll go away. But yeah, very fun ARPG otherwise. Super excited for PoE 2 when it comes out. Tornado of Elemental, whatever it's called, is really fun. You get to throw around fire tornadoes. That's a good time.
I mean,
Right.
who doesn't love a good fire tornado?
Who doesn't love a good fire tornado?
which
All
one
right.
of you is not a fire tornado enthusiast?
Wyatt, I think you have a few alien-related things that you wanted to mention.
I have a few. So you know what? I'm gonna save the movie part till the shout out because there's a couple things I want to talk about. But um one of the games I have been playing, as I said, I've been on a massive sci-fi kick recently, which means the Alien franchise has been kind of floating back into my orbit, which I've always loved. I always love aliens. Alien or aliens. You know, some movies are better than others. Much better than others. But one game that I have been playing that's not alien related at all, but definitely has that kind of atmosphere to it is a game called Genesis Alpha 1, which is it's a lot of it's this game is a lot of things. So part of it is a kind of ship management kind of building game. The basic premise is you've been sent out to find an inhabitable planet because Earth is slowly decaying. Not the most, interesting or original thing in the world, but definitely gets the job done. You gather resources by gathering debris with like a tractor beam or flying down to planets to like mine things. And then you bring it all back to your ship where you can use it to build out your equipment, build new rooms for your ship, that kind of thing. And you're just kind of flying around. You go from system to system and you're looking for all this stuff. It's also, here's the weird thing, it's also a roguelike, which I was not expecting at all. The way that this game is designed is that you can go for like 20 plus hours and that's just one run. And then you can die and lose everything and go back to the beginning again, which I haven't sunk that much time into it, so I don't know how that feels. But that'll definitely be interesting when/if that happens. The cool part is a lot of the shipbuilding or a lot of the ship management stuff is very interesting. So your crew's all made up of clones. There's a whole cloning facility that you have, and you start off by just making like human clones, and then you can assign them to different rooms, and their stats increase based on what they do. So if they work in, the tractor beam room, that they have certain stats that that are affected by by that room, that sort of thing. The cool thing is two things. Um, you can kill different bugs in the game, which disappointingly, there's like I haven't run into that many enemy types yet, and it's all the same kind of bug on every planet, which I understand that would be a very difficult thing to do to have a bunch of different like looking aliens for different planets because it's such a small dev team, so I understand. But you can start to collect their DNA and then use them in your cloning process. So you can create different
Oh,
alien human
ooh,
It's
hybrid
very fun.
clones that have
oh,
different
cool.
like capabilities than your standard human clone. But that also means in your giant like greenhouse room that provides oxygen for your entire ship, you have to start accommodating this different type of life form. So you have to plant different plants that you also get
Oh
from
my
different
god.
planets and stuff like that. It's crazy. And there's another cool aspect where when you use the tractor beam and pull in debris, or even when you fly back from a ship, sometimes you get a few alien stragglers that try and squirm onto your ship and run around.
Oh,
There's service tunnels underneath most of the
oh
rooms in your
no.
ship, and so you have to crawl down and kind of
Oh
duck walk
no.
through the service tunnels and make sure you get all the aliens in there. And that feels very alien to me, which is great. You're in these like tight confined spaces. You're looking for these like creepy alien life forms. You even have like a radar that's very similar to the motion tracker in Aliens, where you've got like the blip that goes out, kind of like a sonar pulse. Super cool stuff. There's also, you can invest in a lot of different defenses for your ship, like different automated turrets and like laser walls and stuff like that. Parts of your ship starts to shut down and like doors close if you're not repairing it correctly. It's a lot going on for such a small team. You can definitely feel that this is another case of them overreaching a little bit. It's a little rough around the edges, definitely. Um, and there's a lot of moments. I was streaming some of this to Ryan a few days ago. I like a lot of the look of the game. They have different looking ship parts for different corporations that sponsor whatever run you're doing, which is pretty cool. But
Really cool aesthetic.
they
Yeah.
have this weird issue where uh, the lighting is super harsh. And I was showing Ryan a few examples
It
of it,
feels
but it's
very
just
like default Unreal 3. Almost.
it's
Huh.
very garish. If you've ever seen, there's a genre of movie called Italian giallo, which is kind of like Italian horror. They have very garish like lights. It's either like full red or full green or something, and it feels like that, but it's very grainy and very. I just wish it was lit differently because I like a lot of the other kind of industrial space uh, look to everything. It's just some of the
Mhm.
lighting feels very harsh. Um, so I kind of wish that was something that was able to be addressed. But as is, it's rough around the edges, but it's super ambitious. There's a lot to it, and it's really, really interesting, and it's very engaging, at least in the early parts of the game that I've been playing in. I'm having a blast with it so far.
Very cool.
Yeah, super cool.
All right, Alex, you have anything else?
Oh,
Anything crazy? I can go if you
Do I
wanna
have
have some time
anything
to think,
else?
but I'm gonna go round the round table.
we're talking about something.
Gamers of the
Crap.
round table, you know?
Now I want
Um,
a round table video game. Where's our King Arthur themed co-op horde shooter?
co-op horde
Shooter?
shooter. What?
I was gonna go for
Huh?
Vermintide, and I said shooter, and let's run with that. Let's run King Arthur with guns.
Shooter?
Lancelot with a sniper rifle. Let's go.
They use like the
Um,
weird crossbow guns from like Tiny Tina.
they're all like Witchfire.
Oh,
Honestly,
that'd be
okay. Okay, if you
fun.
had
Actually, crap.
An Arthurian myth, but they're all using like guns from Witchfire,
It's
that'd be
pretty
kind of
rad.
tight. That's kind of cool, actually.
Great new fantasy. Crap.
Yeah, but we came up with that game while we were giving Alex time to think.
Yes.
I've also been doing my honestly at this point it feels like my monthly twiddling my fingers pilgrimage playing some Outward again because I forget it was some Discord conversation I was having with people and then I mentioned it's never been more satisfying to jump kick a rabbit in the face.
You mean
I,
not Outward? What's the name of that game? What's it called?
uh,
Outward is the game we were talking about a few minutes ago.
no, Overgrown.
Overgrown. Yeah, I was like, I know the game you're talking about. It's not at work.
Yeah.
What?
Yeah.
What?
Oh, my brain's already mush.
No, you're good.
Yeah, no, it's this very fun like physics, like sort of light action game, where you play as an anthropomorphic rabbit who is hell bent on kicking the absolute crap out of dogs and cats who are oppressing other rabbits. It's what's like if Watership Down was a fighting game.
Yeah, that feels like a good description, you know? I think that that covers it pretty much directly. Yeah, it's a fun game. It's got a lot of like community levels and stuff too.
That's a very funny
it's
sentence.
very
Plays a
mod
lot.
friendly.
That.
And also something that I learned was apparently, so this was made by Wolffire Games, which is also like the man behind that is also like behind Humble Bundle. Is that true?
I think they were behind some of the early Humble Bundle stuff. Because I think I own Overgrowth and Receiver from some of the early Humble Bundle stuff. Because I also love to shout out Receiver, which is one of Wolffire Games' other games, which is basically like the hyper realistic reloading that you have to do, and you have very limited amounts of ammo. And the whole idea is you're basically like playing the gun. Very fun roguelike. I haven't played Receiver 2, but I've heard it's also very well received. So
They came out with a second one?
yeah, there's a second Receiver.
Ooh, I have to try that out.
It's got more types of weapons and stuff. Yeah, I do want to give it a shot at some point, but I know they're working I believe they're working on another thing now that is meant to come out at some point.
Nice. I like that developer. They've come up with some fun stuff, and I saw a GDC conference that he was talking at too, where he wasn't the best at animation, so for Overgrowth, he doesn't use any animation technically. They're all blend shapes, things that are morphed between. It's really cool how that handles the sort
it's
of
really interesting.
physicsy combat and how everything has a really definite weight to it. You really can sense the impact of the punches and the flying kicks you can do as a rabbit.
Yeah, it's really
also
fascinating.
You can throw knives. That's fun.
I'm excited to see what they come out with next, because I think Receiver and Overgrowth are really interesting. So, all right.
Two vastly different games.
Really wildly different, although both very physics based. So maybe that's their through line. Okay, the other thing that I had wanted to mention is I've been playing a lot of Kunitsugami, Path of the Goddess, which I do plan to make you all play because it's really good.
I was actually really surprised you didn't do it during the last round, although I think you wanted to do something older.
Yeah, because there were a lot of new stuff, so I wanted to make sure we were playing something old too to kind of mix it in, get some Octopath in there, to vary up the games we were playing. Because I will make you all play Kunitsugami at the earliest opportunity. But it's super cool. It's basically like it is really like a tower defense action game, which I'm a big fan of old tower defenses. I grew up playing Newgrounds tower defense games, and I think Kunitsugami is a really cool like adaptation of that type of game mixed with Capcom's like bread and butter action stylings, and just a super fascinating landscape, really beautiful game through most of it. Very low on dialogue. It's like a classic staged based game, so you're moving through stages, and basically like it's a 2-part thing where you'll have the first part is going through and like creating a like tower defense path to move this shrine maiden along so that she can cleanse the corruption at the area while you're going around and cleansing civilians, and then you can like upgrade them with these like magic masks that they put on to become like an archer or a woodcutter or other classes of like functionally your towers, right? You can move them around and position them where you want, and you've got lots of cool commands that you can do of like you can hold the button and then command them to go back to like protect the priestess so she's not getting assaulted by things that are getting near to her. You can make them go on like the offensive and like focus down a boss if it spawns. And this is all happening while you have your own full action game moveset going on, which is super fun, including special attacks. So you have like crazy special attacks you can pull off and other stuff. That like I have a crazy fire dance I can do. It's all themed after like Kagura dancing, which is super fascinating, really cool aesthetic that I don't think I've seen in a video game before. Um, and it just works really well. Like it feels a lot more cohesive than I thought it would be. There's even like a little bit where you're repairing towns after you've defended them. You can like repair them and unlock new things to upgrade yourself with. Uh, all that jazz. And then there's also like a boss fight phase where you can go fight a boss nearby, and those are really fun. The boss encounters are pretty crazy. It feels really cool because you're like bringing the people from the town with you. So it's not just you; it's you and like 10 people assaulting a boss, and it feels very like scale heavy, in a cool way. Yeah, I'm not super far in it, but I so far have been thoroughly enjoying it. And from my understanding, it's like a 12 to 15 hour game, which feels like the perfect length for this type of thing. So I'm excited to run through it and hopefully finish it.
It's got that fucking wild art style going.
Wild art style, phenomenal soundtrack, like kaleidoscope art style is an insane thing to talk about. It looks gorgeous.
It should be too much, but from a lot of what
they
I've seen,
use it really sparingly.
Yeah.
They use it at the moments where it's like your sword on special attacks will trail like a kaleidoscope effect.
It seems like they had a lot of it in the trailers to show it off, but it doesn't seem like that's the whole game.
Yeah, that's generally like when you're finishing something. So, or if you look at the sky, sometimes you can see like the kaleidoscope effect on the sky,
which is probably good that it wasn't the whole game, because that would probably
it is distracting, but
yeah.
It adds a lot of emphasis to the special attacks, and it gets used as like the boss cleansing thing, which is super cool. Mm-hmm. So I've been having a great time with it, and definitely intend to fully finish it out. So thoroughly enjoying that. All right, Wyatt, do you have anything else on your list that you wanted to talk about?
Yeah. So like I said, been super into Aliens recently. Rewatched Alien, saw Alien Romulus, which I want to save until the shout outs to talk about a little bit. But it did give me a hankering to play some Alien or Aliens themed games. I got a couple. I don't have all of them, but I have a couple. Now you may be thinking, oh, those old AVP games are great, classics. Even the 2010 one is pretty good. Or Alien Isolation, probably one of the best translations of the Alien franchise we've ever gotten in video game form. I even heard Dark Descent was pretty good. I didn't play any of those. No. That would be the smart decision. I decided to play Aliens Colonial Marines. However, I wanted to mod it. There's an overhaul mod that I've seen before, that's great, and it really tries to fix so much of the game. And boy, howdy, let me tell you, I think I did something wrong. um, oh, man, I had music playing in the background. I usually do on these podcasts, and I'm pausing it for a second because I need to talk about something.
Oh.
I need I It's actually difficult for me to express how much I want this game to be good, and I want a good version of this game, because this is like a dream game for me. 4-player co-op action first-person shooter, you and 3 other buddies, or even you and solo with an AI buddy. I don't even care. Yeah, your colonial marines. You got all your shotguns and the pulse rifles and the smart rifles and all that awesome stuff, and you're fighting xenomorphs that are crawling around on the walls, and they're trying to get behind you, and they're like coming out of vents and ducts and all this stuff, and it's got the lighting, it's got the look, and this ain't it, man. But this ain't it. But God, it's so close. It's everything that I wanted, just not just crap. And it makes me so sad. Because it's got like the dedicated button for the motion tracker, which you got to use to look around to make sure they're not trying to get in behind you. It's got a lot of classic Alien iconography. It's just I just wish it was good. And this overhaul mods does, because I've played this overhaul mod before, many years ago during quarantine actually. And I remember enjoying it. I was like, yeah, clearly they're trying to like patch together this crappy game, and they're doing their best. but I remember the aliens moving in a really interesting way. I must have messed up something with the mod install because it isn't working properly. But I really got to hand it to Templar GFX, which is the guy that made this mod, or the team that made this mod. They did the darndest job that they could, man. They really they went all out. And I just want a good version of this at some point. It looks like there's a VR kind of aliens themed colonial marine looking thing that looks promising. But man, it's hard for me to express how much I want a good version of Colonial Marines out in the world, because it's one of my dream games, is like an action FPS with some horror elements involved and like creepy lighting. Oh, damn.
You're asking too much.
Maybe I am. But I listen, a man can dream. All right, a man can dream.
I would love to get Arcane on.
No, I got the
Yeah.
perfect.
They can make
I got
it
the
awesome.
perfect developer. I got the perfect developer for
Yeah.
you. Wow. Now that I'm mentioning it, I forget
It's
the
gone.
name
I'm
off
glad
the
you had
top
a
of my
perfect
head.
developer for it.
The developer of the Metro games would be such a
Yeah, you're right.
perfect
They would definitely do a killer
for an
job.
aliens like action FPS. They would.
Yeah,
They
Metro
would
or
kill
Stalker
it, dude.
would do
Yeah.
great with it.
They would absolutely kill it because they were already most of the way there. They got all the parts. They just need the setting. If we're talking about dream like franchise with developer, that's one for you right there. But yeah, Colonial Marines is one of those games that I can play, and I almost get a weird kind of sick enjoyment out of like connecting the dots in my brain of what it could have been, which in a weird way kind of propels me to play it more, if that makes sense. It's kind of like when I played Biomutant and I was like, I see what you're going for, and I'm like connecting all of the dots in my head, and but you just couldn't quite pull it together. It's one of those like weird fascinations that you like playing even though it's not very good.
Yeah, very cool. I'm with you when I want more, like, I want more specifically light horror action games. Because I feel like from what I've played, and I need to play RE 7 and 8, because I think they're probably very up this alley. Having played through recently RE4 Remake, which was maybe up there for my game of the year last year. Very, very good.
I should play that soon.
Real joy in that like action-y horror. I think I found it like much more enjoyable than, even though I really liked RE2 Remake, I think RE4 Remake really like blew me out of the water with how fun it was, having not played the original. And man, I would love more games in that territory of like being still horror games, but a little bit more on the side of like you can fight back and have cool action things to do during it.
Yeah.
Very fun. All right. I have another game to mention, Alex, unless you've got something you want to mention.
I'm running dry. I've been very single-minded.
All right.
To be honest.
His tank
that's
is empty.
acceptable. Sometimes you just really blitz one thing. There's another game that came out very recently in early access called Fields of Mystria. This is a 90s anime themed farming sim. Which I know both of you, I would encourage you to look at the Steam page for this because it is gorgeous. I think it is one of the best like pixel art style. Fields of Mystria. It's very popular right now, so I assume if you type Fields, you'll see it very quickly.
Oh, I have seen this. Yeah.
Gorgeous game. It plays really well. It really feels like the sort of like, if you really liked Stardew and not much else has done it for you in the farming sphere, Fields of Mystria feels like a good fit. Really fun to play. It's just an early access, but it definitely feels a lot more complete than any other early access stuff I played recently, aside from like Enshrouded and Wayfinder. Yeah, super complete game.
It's been a good
really
year
fun to
for
play.
early access.
Yeah, good year for early access. Normally I'm not a
Yeah.
huge like early access game player, but there's been a couple really good things. And yeah, it's really fun to play already. I think there's a lot I'm looking forward to as this game gets further along. The writing is really good. That's one thing that I think is like a huge note here, is most games in like this farming sim genre entirely succeed based on writing. Like Fae Farm came out last year, and a big problem with it was like the writing for the like dateable NPCs was really bad, so you just kind of didn't have that long tail to learn about people because there was no drive here. Everything in Fields of Mystery has been very good. Like it has definitely that Stardew or above level of production going into the writing quality. And its first patch already added more lines for people, which is very cool. Granted, it doesn't have voice acting, so it's text, but very good so far. I've had a great time with it. It's super customizable, lots of fun like decoration stuff you can do. The farming is about as complicated as you'd expect right now. I haven't done anything crazy in it, but it being in a fantasy world, there is magic and other stuff too. So I know there are magical spells you can get to do fun things, which I haven't gotten to yet. But I just want to call it out as like a fun early access farming game with a really enjoyable aesthetic that I've been having a good time with. You can also jump. It's kind of wild. I don't think I know another farming game where you can jump.
Well, especially a pixel art top-down game.
Yeah, you can jump and you can swim. So
that's crazy.
It's really fun to explore. And I'm hoping to see some cool things out of this game.
Cool.
All right. Alex, I'm going to ask a dreaded question.
Oh boy. Okay.
Honestly, probably less dreaded for you and more for Wyatt because he's going to have to listen to this. How have you been feeling about Destiny lately?
How have I been feeling about
You guys have fun? I'll be right back.
Oh, no, you don't, Wyatt. You know, the way things are shaping up, you're in trouble.
He's still here and he's got the headphones on.
And why I say he's in trouble more so than because he just doesn't like it is it's slowing down.
The reason I bring it up
feels
is
a little bit more than just the regular content lull because they have scaled back. We're talking just the game, not Bungie as a whole, right?
Oh no, that's I was leading this as a segue into that. So,
okay.
Bungie laid off a bunch of people recently. This is a second round of layoffs. I believe between the two, they've laid off around 40% of the studio, though a number of those have not actually been laid off. They have been moved into other areas within Sony. So a bunch of them have formed. One of the incubation projects Bungie had going is now a Sony project and a separate studio that is being formed around it. So a bunch of people got moved to that. There's a few people I think just joined different studios within Sony instead of being properly laid off. But yeah, there was a big, I think like 18% of the company was laid off in another round, which is a real shame. Like Bungie's been having a hard go of it lately. So
yeah, none of them were Pete Parsons yet.
Yeah, like it seems like there's a real problem with Bungie leadership. Like that seems like what this is coming down to, and not a ton has happened. So I believe there was a rumor floating around last year that I think has been corroborated since of there being some part of the Bungie deal, meaning that when they don't hit certain financial targets, they become more integrated with Sony than they were.
It's a very
it seems like that is what has
creeping
happened,
doom
right?
meter.
I feel like that they've hit that point.
Wild deal. That's kind of crazy.
Yeah, so it's crazy. Yeah, I think there's something. Obviously, something has gone on there, or else this wouldn't have happened. But it's really unfortunate. I think Bungie is in a bad position right now because the final shape was excellent. Like
the final shape was
excellent.
Because of all the ill will from the general population, it sold worse than Lightfall.
Yeah, I mean, I think that was really an example of what one terrible release can do to the strength of it, especially because I think Destiny doesn't have goodwill anymore. I think they've spent their goodwill meter with the people that don't play the game anymore, and they needed to buy that back, and maybe Final Shape would have gotten it, right? Like if we had another yearly expansion coming next year that was like, okay, here's the next saga, it's a great jumping in point for new players, I would be really curious to see how that would go for them, because I think it would have gone pretty well. That's not the world we live in now. So
there's no more yearly expansions.
No more yearly expansions. Obviously, I think like just the layoffs are going to be the thing that is kind of knocking them down, because it really just seems like that's... I think any goodwill left for them has gone at this point. And I wonder how much of that's due to Marathon being an extraction shooter. I feel like there's just not a lot of excitement around Marathon right now. Jason Schreier's
Bungie's
put
the
out a few
only
reports
thing
on
that's
them.
making, or not Bungie. Destiny 2 is the only thing that's making Bungie money at the
Yeah,
moment.
it's clearly not making them enough, right? So uh, I'm just really wondering what's going on there and hoping they can release something that is fun. Because like I'll play Marathon if it's good, but an extraction shooter is a hard sell, right? Like that's a thing that I think
Yeah,
I
it's a
think it
genre that I'm
falls into
already
that
not
territory of like,
predisposed to.
yeah, like this is a common MMO thing is hardcore gamers saying they want there's an audience that really wants what New World went through, a full loot PvP MMO, which is basically like you kill other players, you take their stuff, and that's the game, right? Then you explore zones and do all the regular MMO stuff, but you're always at odds with other players, especially if they're on like a different faction or something. But the audience that actually wants that game is much smaller than the MMO audience. Like it's not a significant amount of people to the point where if you're making that game, it's probably better for it to be like server based or something smaller and not an MMO. As New World learned during development and had to rework their entire game because they were like, wait a minute, this isn't going to make enough money to pay the dev team, so we need to become a game that can appeal to PvE players. But then you have the problem of PvE players don't want the same thing that PvP players do, and so you're doing either the Bungie thing where you're balancing separately for both, or you have to make a worse game for both of them in the hopes that still be good enough that they continue to play it, which historically has not worked out super well for people. I think there's like a handful of games that have managed that. Of like World of Warcraft PvP is still going strong, but there's a few other things that are, I think, that
How's the Final
good.
Fantasy 14 PvP?
I mean, it's good, but Final Fantasy 14 PvP is there's no open world PvP, right? There never has been and never will be. I would assume. It's all match made, so it's like you queue into a PvP match, and there's no chatting, there's nothing like that. You have to use set emotes to communicate, and it's fun. Like I have played quite a lot of the PvP, and it's good. It's very enjoyable, but it's not like I would never say PvP is a reason to play Final Fantasy 14. Like I think you're gonna have like WoW. I would say has more PvP focused modes. I think a lot of other MMOs do good at it. Like Guild Wars 2 has great PvP modes. ESO has really cool PvP. So I feel like you would go to any number of other MMOs before 14 if you're looking for PvP. Yeah, I feel like that's the case here for extraction shooters, being that like there is a really hardcore audience of extraction shooter fans. They're playing Tarkov, and a lot of them have gotten really angry at Tarkov and stopped playing Tarkov. So
Yeah.
I really wonder like what is Bungie gonna get from doing an extraction shooter?
It's
And if they're
this
reworking
it's
it, how are they gonna
crazy.
rework it?
Speaking of that, it was a while ago that they said that they brought in Tarkov players to test Marathon. They're just like, this ain't it, Chief.
Yeah, they were not having a great time.
I will never understand. I get I'll never understand taking an IP that was originally a single player game and then
Perverting it.
trying well and then trying to hop into this extraction shooter trend that's happening right now. Something I feel like, and again, I don't have a ton of experience with this, so maybe I'm wrong, but extraction shooters feels like, in terms of that space, feels difficult to get into, in the same way that it does for like MOBAs, where people have their one extraction shooter or their one MOBA, and it's really difficult to
Yeah,
get them to play multiple or to switch to one. So to have an extraction shooter come out this late in the game, especially when you're going through these kind of financial troubles, feels like such a I just don't understand it. It's like if they had just done a relative quick and dirty boomer shooter with Marathon, do you know how much goodwill that would probably bring back? If anything, I don't know.
even
I
just like
don't understand
do a
it.
remake of Marathon 1 and 2 in like
Yeah,
as basic as possible, but doing like a modern art style, I think would have gotten you a lot.
yeah. I mean, like I said, the boomer shooter craze is going strong even into 2024. I feel like that would have been a much smarter thing to latch onto, because then you also have a more diverse, like, modern portfolio too. You can get different
Which is also
people
why
in
I'm wondering,
there.
because they did like a whole ARG thing for that trailer, and I feel like ARG, if you're making an ARG as your marketing thing, I feel like that typically works a lot better for like either an MMO or something that has like a big community aspect, or a single player game where people are like big lore nerds and really want to get into the lore of it. Not for a PvP extraction shooter, right? Like,
Which I will say, like, Marathon has a lot of lore, but
yeah.
again, it's the wrong genre for something like that. I don't understand it.
And it's like, I can't even. Normally, I would say it's like they want the brand recognition, but who's brand recognizing Marathon, right? Like, extraction shooter people
Also,
are probably. I think they would lean on the younger side of players. They're not going to know what
I feel
Marathon
like
is.
I feel like if there's a Venn diagram of Marathon fans that still play video games and extraction shooter fans, they're
It's
like
like
on
one
opposite
guy.
sides of the planet.
There's like
They're
a
on
single.
opposite.
There's a single
They're above
person.
40 years old and
Listen,
racist.
in a single circle, I'll tell you that much. It is opposite sides of the planet. It was such a miscalculation, I think. It's
Yeah,
so
I'm hoping
bizarre.
it comes out and is okay though, because it's clearly like it's been supposedly internally delayed from when it was shown off the last time, which makes sense. I think it was supposed to launch this year when they originally showed it, and clearly that has not happened. Um, so maybe we'll see something at Gamescom or something teasing what they're doing, but I don't know. It's like Bungie's in a really precarious position right now, which is a shame because I think Destiny is in the most fun to play state it's been in for a long time. Granted, there's a lot of like, I think the sentiment around the Echoes thing for Destiny is not amazing, but I don't know. I've never been like a huge live service pusher for Destiny, so I don't know how much different it feels to me than a normal season does. I think it maybe feels a little bit too long, just because I'm like, there's like 3
I
levels of battle pass that I have to grind through if I want to
there's
continue playing a certain
there's
thing.
that
So
weird feeling with with the seasonal stories. You had like 8 weeks where there was one story mission a week, and then either like at the end or sometime in the middle of those as a break, you had the seasonal event, like whether it was Halloween or solstice or Christmas or
yeah,
you know, Guardian games or whatever the stuff was. Now we're supposedly getting 3 a year, and we get them in bunches. So for now, we are getting them in bunches of 3 at a time, like one a week for 3 weeks in a row, and then we have 3 weeks off, and then 3 weeks on again, and then 3 weeks off, and then I feel like I'm being pushed away with that frequency of content, honestly.
yeah.
Like I get how it makes it easier to jump in, but it's making me want to jump in less. So, but that's a personal thing with that. They have said that they are going to be, I forget whether it's with the start of episode 2 or 3, that they are just going to be releasing all the story content at once for that,
I'm really
I
curious how that's
think.
gonna feel because like I don't
I
know. I
am
think the way that
too.
I play it, it might feel better for me because then I'll feel less bad about not playing it after I do the
Yeah.
story stuff. But at the same time, that maybe isn't the best for business. But yeah, I
I
don't know.
can
I'm really curious.
imagine that because of that, engagement numbers are probably going to they might average out, but I can imagine them like swinging wildly from person to person,
Yeah,
based on how
definitely.
people react to that.
Um, yeah, which is just it's weird. It's weird to say all of this after we have complimented the final shape so much of being like legitimately some
It
of the best
sucks.
content they've ever made.
It sucks to say it.
Which is wild too, because a bunch of stuff came out afterwards. Where like Final Shape went through a bunch of rewrites. Great, it came out great. So,
Oh yeah,
yeah,
phenomenal story.
I really wish they could have gotten to do like I would totally get moving away from yearly expansions at this point because Destiny 2's been out for a while. Like it got its 10-year cycle. It can
I,
definitely move to.
it doesn't
Uh,
have the level of content that I think could prop this up, but I was thinking,
yeah,
like if they could do the Final Fantasy 14 thing where it's like one big one every 3 years and having the patches in
because
between, I
Final
would.
Fantasy 14 does a big expansion every 2 years.
2 years, okay.
But their patch cycle is really like heavy. Like there are big story things in every patch. Though granted they are further apart. Like 14 does not have the content pace that WoW does. It's definitely a slower burn, but I do think it has like for the people that play 14, that is a good thing, right? Because they want to come back and play everything at once, and then they'll do like, oh, I'm gonna continue progressing my character stuff. I'll play side quests. I'll do the quest lines that I haven't done. Like there's so much other optional non-main story stuff in Final Fantasy to do.
You also have so many jobs to grind if you're
Yeah,
into that
like because
well,
it's essentially, whereas in WoW, when you like go through your content, you would make an alt and continue playing that, which is a super cool style of play. But for people that prefer to have one character, you can do it in 14 and have like, oh, I'm going to progress everything on my one character that I'm really attached to, and I'll change jobs and level this up in that. And yeah, I think it works really well for 14. It's a very different style than what Destiny is. Like, I don't think there's a lot that Destiny could take from that model. Because 14 has the same problem as Destiny in some regards of like not having a great new player entry point, though at least 14 has the benefit of they never removed the story, right?
Both 14 and Destiny, I feel like definitely it's I definitely have, my own information bubble with this, but I feel as though, they're both games where you absolutely the only way new players are going to be brought into the game is by groups of existing players introducing them to that. It's not something
or
that
big Final Fantasy fans. In the case of Final Fantasy, right? I think that's something that FF14 has going for it. Is it's an MMO in a series that people really like, and they hear that it has a great story, so they might play it regardless of if they like MMOs because they like the series. So Destiny doesn't have that benefit, right? Because you can't play the campaign anymore. Which, granted, Red War wasn't excellent, but it was fun enough and it was content to do.
But you still paid for it.
Yeah, like
you still paid for it. It doesn't.
I mean, technically,
I
didn't. Technically, I didn't. I got that Forsaken and Shadowkeep for free.
Doesn't matter.
That's great for you, Alex.
Because there's
yeah.
so
I came
many
in just
people.
the right time.
There's so many people that did pay for it, and now they can't play it. Imagine watching a movie
absolutely screwed up.
And then you come back and watch the movie 3 or 4 years later, and like a whole act is missing.
I'll put it in this way, Wyatt.
Imagine
you've watched Star Wars and you love Star Wars, you love the original trilogy, and then you come back and you realize you can't ever watch the version without the Wampa butt in frame. That's Bungie. All right.
You be stuck with the version where someone says Macalanky.
Macalanky. We're stuck in that version. I think that's a good spot. I think it's a good spot to end at in terms of the Bungie talk. Because we don't have any solutions. So
no, what am I gonna do? I'm not.
Hopefully they've got some stuff cooking. I am hopeful for Bungie because I love their games and I think they make great games. Like Destiny is incredibly fun
I've
to
ever
play.
Felt in a shooter.
And I really hope they are working on something that I can play as a single player or co-op thing and have a great time with. And I just don't. I don't know. So we'll see.
I wonder what Gummy Bears was supposed to be.
If only Destiny could have been given the Wayfinder treatment.
Honestly, like I do. Yeah, I wonder if that is a potential route, right? Like I would be down for them to, when Destiny 2 reaches the sort of like end of its full development, which seems like it might be coming soon, just re-release all the old content in a like not server-based way if they have the bandwidth to unhook that from being something that requires server maintenance, which I don't know that they do. But yeah, I would love that if that eventually happened. All right. I have one last game that I wanted to mention, and then we'll move into shout-outs, unless, Wyatt, you've got something else you want to bring up.
I mean, I could talk about Deep Rock Galactic until I'm blue in the face, but I feel like we've talked about it.
Yeah, we have talked about Deep Rock recently.
So go ahead.
So last thing I want to mention, Humble Bundle did a little bundle thing where they had a bunch of tower defense games, and being, as I said, a Newgrounds tower defense fan, I had to pick up the tower defense bundle. And I've been playing one of the games from that called Diplomacy is Not an Option, which is, to me, it's a little bit less of a tower defense and feels a little bit more like Age of Empires, but it's like you're defending a stronghold, basically. And so you're building out your area. You have your like lumberjacks and your miners and stuff to get things. You're like recruiting new units you control in like an RTS fashion. But
I
the
love
gist
this.
is,
I
yeah,
love this low poly art style. This
it's
looks
a great
great.
art style. The gist is you're a king who's basically just done a terrible job, and all the peasants are revolting, and you have to defend yourself from the peasants that are out to kill you because you are a terrible king. Uh, and you build these cool strongholds and like form walls, put archers on the walls, and the whole gist is like it can be thousands of things on screen at once. Um, it's very fun. It's a super cool game. Also in early access right now, but already very functional. It's just a really fun time to run through. I've been having a good time with that because it is simple enough that it's easy to like. It's like a fast-paced Age of Empires where you're like, okay, I put my lumberjacks down, I built my houses, now I can recruit more recruits and like send them out to do things. And
Well, it seems
we'll
like
just do
Age of
stuff.
Empires, but you're on the back foot the whole time.
Yeah, sort of. Except you're also not expected to like raid the map. Like you're really defending one spot,
Mm,
which is how
I
I
can get
tend
down for
to
that.
like my RTS levels, just because I don't have the big brain to comprehend full RTS strategy, even though I played tons of StarCraft. But yeah, it's super fun. That bundle is still going, so if anyone is a fan of RTS or tower defense games, check out the Humble Bundle for tower defense happening right now because it's cheaper than just buying the game on its own by a decent chunk. So if you wanted to play Diplomacy is Not an Option or any of the other games in that bundle, definitely check it out. All right,
Cool.
we'll move into shoutouts if no one else
Yeah.
has something they want to mention
Um,
because we're at time.
yeah.
So
I'll start. So like I said, I wanted to talk about Alien Romulus for a second in the shout out. But that is because I watched two movies recently. I went to a movie theater and watched two movies recently. First one was Alien Romulus, which was great. I think it's uh uh structure wise, if you kind of zoom out, it's very standard alien fare. A bunch of people go to a space station and are attacked by xenomorphs. But I love the two central characters. I think they have a very interesting relationship, something that we haven't seen in this world before that I thought was very interesting. Um, they have a lot of really good set pieces that I think try and do different things with how the xenomorphs work, which was really fun. Especially there's one zero G sequence that was a lot of fun, and I'm not going to say any more than that.
very cool.
It was awesome. Um, yeah, no, excellent time. I think my only issues is that the characters weren't outside of the two leads. The characters were just kind of alien food and not super interesting or likable. And
Alien food.
there is some truly groan-worthy callbacks to other movies. Some of them were kind of neat and ones that I wasn't expecting, but some of them I rolled my eyes so hard they popped out of my head. Like it was really bad. There's a whole like CG character, legacy character that they try and bring back like
Mm,
Star Wars style, and it's really bad and really pointless. Didn't ruin the movie for me, but I thought I would mention that. The
that's
other
funny.
movie that I saw that was just as high level quality was Borderlands. I actually went and I saw this movie.
Oh boy.
My girlfriend's a really big fan of Borderlands. I like Borderlands well enough, and I wanted to see if it was funny bad or just bad. Um, it is one of the most boring things I've ever seen in my entire life, and
It's also
I'm gonna
isn't it
sound like
already coming to streaming at the end of the month?
yes.
No.
Yes. So I went to go see it. So there's two movie theaters that's really close to me, right? They're both owned by the same company, right? It's kind of like a local thing. The one that's right near my apartment stopped showing the movie after like a week and a half. The other one was still seeing it, but yeah, they stopped showing it after like a week and a half, which is crazy. I'll say this. People are saying that it's worse than Madam Web. It's worse than Madam Web only in that it's more boring to watch. It's one of those things where like it's bad because it's too competent to be like a The Room or something like that
Mm-hmm.
where it's like you're just amazed by what you're watching how something could be so terrible and make so little sense. It's too competent for that. It's just really boring. And I might sound like an idiot for saying this, but they got Borderlands wrong. Like, in terms of the world and the humor, no matter what you think about
I mean, it's PG-13
right?
Borderlands movie. Like, that's insane to me.
Yeah,
Ew.
it like it's just weird little things if you've played the games before, little things that they get wrong. Like, you know how in every mainline game, Marcus always does the intro. He's like, "So you want to hear another story," right? He always
Yeah.
starts off with this. They have like a narrated intro, but it's from Lilith. And it's just like it's one of those small
It's like,
things where it's like literally you could say the exact same information with Marcus, who was one of the only well-cast characters in the entire movie. To say that line, nothing would have changed, and it would have felt even a little bit more like Borderlands. And again, it doesn't matter if you actually like Borderlands or not. If you're making a Borderlands movie, you would want it to feel like Borderlands. And it just wasn't
Apparently
like
not.
it's so weird. It wasn't even that funny. They took it too seriously. It was
It's
so
wild.
this-
That's so
is
strange
this a
to me.
case-
bizarre.
Is this a case of they have gone on record of saying they hate the source material, or they just didn't see it at all?
No,
I
Like
mean, Randy
the
Pitchford
Halo
was
show.
like the creative producer on this, right?
One
You're
of the
kidding me.
producers was Strauss Zelnick, who's like the CEO of what is it? Fucking like 2K or Warner Brothers or whatever. But he's there. He had like a hand in the movie. So it's just yeah, and Randy Pitchford was a producer too. It's just so strange, and it's one of the most miscast things I think I've ever seen in my entire life. No shade to any of the actors in the movie, but like Kate Blanchett as Lilith.
Just a weird
What?
pick, right?
Great actor. Probably one of the best actors working. Absolutely should not play Lilith under any circumstances unless it's like an elderly Lilith, right? Like Tannis is played by Jamie Lee Curtis for some reason.
Another
It's
very strange, like,
Great actress.
If you know who
Why?
if you know who Gina Gershon is, great actor is playing Moxie. I don't understand why. The only two people who were cast well was Jack Black as Claptrap, which why didn't you just get the same voice actor from Borderlands 3? I know the one from 2 left because he doesn't like Randy Pitchford and they replaced him in 3. Why didn't you just get the same voice actor? I have no idea, but Jack Black did the best that he could. And whoever played Marcus did a really good job. It looked and sounded and he felt just like Marcus. But that's it. I'm like forgetting parts of the movie as I was watching it. Like literally the next day, the morning after we watched the movie, I looked over at my girlfriend and I was like, "We watched a movie last night, right?" And she was like, "Oh yeah."
Stop
I
trying to
forgot
remember it,
we-
Wyatt. Your brain's doing damage
I
control.
forgot that we watched a movie. It was insane. It was insane. It's not a so funny it's bad movie, unfortunately. The best way to describe it is a puzzle piece where all the pieces fit, but the picture it makes is like a 2-year-old's crayon drawing. It's just so boring. Oh, so dull. Anyway, that's the longest shout out we've ever had, and I'm done.
all right.
Wow.
Alex, you want to follow that up?
Yeah, today actually happens to be the anniversary, 2021, the 3-year anniversary of that awful time I saw a meme describing an alarm clock as supple and plump.
Why do you
How's
do
that
this
right.
to
follow-up?
us?
Well,
Why do you do this to
wonderful.
us? Why do you do this to us?
Bring us back to the realm of sanity. Was there any more to that, Alex, or is that the end?
Nope, I don't want to go into it more. Not on the podcast.
Great, wonderful. I got these cool dice at Gen Con. I think they're very fun. If I can find where the camera is now. Focus in.
Ooh.
Hell
They're
yeah.
hollow metal dice, and they have a dragon inside.
Do they make
Like
like
a
a little
little-
wind chime sound? A lot
No,
of
they're
hollow
just-
dice tend to
they're,
make
they're
little.
metal dice. Don't make a wind
I
time
love
chime, but
that.
the little dragon inside. I have the D6 shows a little better on the camera, I think, because it's less.
You can actually see the
Okay,
dragon
yeah, you
inside
can see the
Marvel.
dragon.
Oh,
Oh,
that looks great. I
There's
love
a red
that.
dragon in there. They're very cool. They're very fun little dice. It was a good pickup. All right, well, that's
yeah.
the show. we did it. As always,
Somehow.
Tuesdays,
Be off.
it'll show up on your feeds, YouTube, Twitch, all the podcast places you can imagine. Whoa.
Yeah.
It's
We'll be back next
listen
week.
to us.
Hopefully with Game Pass games, and probably talking about Gamescom, depending on what happens there the week after.
Go watch Board